Well, now I wish this chapter were as easy to expound as it is to sing with you and the heart that you've got in singing. But let's look at it. Acts chapter 12. It's not easy. I don't promise you it's easy. But there are some wonderful truths in it. God giving us help. Now about that time, Herod the king stretched out his hand to harass some of the church. Then he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. And because he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded further to seize Peter also. Now it was during the days of unleavened bread. So when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 squads of soldiers to keep him, intending to bring him before the people after Passover. Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. And when Herod was about to bring him out that night, Peter was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, and the guards before the door were keeping the prison. Now behold, an angel of the Lord stood by him, and a light shone in the prison, and he struck Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, "Arise quickly." And his chains fell off his hands. And the angel said to him, "Gird yourself and tie on your sandals." And so he did. And he said to him, Put on your garment and follow me." So he went out and followed him, and did not know that what was done by the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. When they were past the first and second guard posts, they came to the iron gate that leads to the city, which opened to them of its own accord. And they went out and went down one street, and immediately the angel departed from him. And when Peter had come to himself, he said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel, and has delivered me from the hand of Herod, and from all the expectation of the Jewish people." So when he had considered this, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together, praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a girl named Rhoda came to answer. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her gladness, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. But they said to her, "You are beside yourself." Yet she kept insisting that it was so. So they said, "It is his angel." Now Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But motioning to them with his hand to keep silent, he declared to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. And he said, "Go tell these things to James and to the brethren." And he departed and went to another place. Then as soon as it was day, there was no small stir among the soldiers about what had become of Peter. And when Herod had searched for him and found not him, he examined the guards and commanded that they should be put to death. And he went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. Now Herod had been very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, but they came to him with one accord, and having made Blastus, the king's chamberlain — what a name for a king's chamberlain, Blastus. Good name for a politician, isn't it? The king's chamberlain, their friend. They asked for peace because their country was supplied with food by the king's country. So on a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat on his throne and gave an oration to them. And the people kept shouting, "The voice of a God and not of a man." Then immediately an angel of the Lord struck him, because he did not give glory to God, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of God grew and multiplied. And Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and they also took with them John, whose surname was Mark. Maybe just down just half an inch, David. Thank you very much. It's very good, brother. Just down a little, and I think we're there. Thank you for your patience. Good. Hope you can all hear. Everybody here all right? Good. If you can't, the Lord bless you. There's no question that this chapter has to do with persecution. But notice that the persecution this time is not instigated by Jewish people against the Christians immediately. It's instigated by Herod. Joe, I think that heat is still on, brother. I hope you're listening. These folk are going to be suffocated. Is he listening? Just get a word to Joe about that heat. Good. Because I don't want you to be too warm, because it's getting very warm. All right? Can you just tell him, Alan? Thank you. Sorry, folks, but I just want you to be comfortable. It gets very hot after 3 hours after a wee while's preaching, and I don't want you to getting too hot. I'll try and keep it to 9:30 if possible. The issue comes because, notice in the first verse, it is, and keep your Bible open before you, it's, if you can, Herod the king, who stretches out his hand to harass the church. It's Herod who does the persecuting. And he kills James, the brother of John, with the sword, and because he saw, verse 3, that it pleased the Jews, then he seizes Peter too. He is the one who instigates the persecution, and the Jews are delighted. Many of them. I think you could say categorically that here is a very clear case of political discrimination on religious grounds. The Jewish leadership in particular, are very pleased that the state is executing Christians. And they are encouraging it. So, without bending the passage or trying to manipulate the passage or spiritualize the passage myself or anything like that, there's no doubt about it that this is a very clear case of political discrimination on religious grounds. I've had tremendous help from David Gooding's book, which I've noted on the back of your note sheet if you want to buy it. It's called True to the Faith by Hodder and Stoughton, are the publishers, and it really is a superb treatment that David gives to this passage, and I'm leaning heavily on it because I find it so helpful. I want to declare my source here gladly. Agrippa's intention was to bring Peter out for trial and public execution immediately after the Passover. Notice it was during Passover time that he apprehended him in verse number 3, and then he puts him in prison, and he's hoping to bring him for trial after Passover. That's very significant. He knows he has many sympathizers, and he takes special precautions against any attempt to free the prisoner. Notice verse number 6 tells you there are 4 guards around Peter at a time. 1 on either side of him, to whom he is chained, and 2 at his cell door. So 1 on his right, 1 on his left, chained to him, and 2 at the cell door, all the time. Now, I would like to ask at the head of this chapter a very basic question. Why do you think that people find political discrimination on religious grounds right? Not only the ancient Jews, obviously, in this passage find it right, but generations in Christendom have done the same thing. Used the state to discriminate against individuals because of their religion. Why does it even to this very day seem attractive to people in many parts of the world, including our own? That's a very basic question, and you've got to ask it. Why did the Jews find it attractive that the state was executing Christians and encourage it? Well, one thing is absolutely for certain: the Jews were setting themselves against the very heart of the Christian gospel. They did not want any compromise with Peter, as we saw last week, the man who had bridged the gap and gone out to the Gentiles and so forth, particularly with Cornelius and then these fellows from Cyprus in chapter 11 last week, and how that, Barnabas came and saw that this had happened. But Peter was the catalyst. He was the one whom God used to reach out from a Jewish corner to bring the gospel to us, ultimately. And the Jews had Peter in their sights because he was the one who had fraternized with the Gentiles and said that both the Jew and the Gentile could be a Christian. Not Jewish Christians, not Gentile Christians, but both one in Christ. Now they're going for that. This is a very big question. Why would Jewish people say, great, he's going to execute that Christian leader? Well, immediately it mightn't seem all that unscriptural. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 2. Here's the law of God. Now, some of you may find this rather difficult, but I'll explain it in a moment or two. You may find it very offensive, but this is the law of God in the Old Testament. Deuteronomy 17 and 2. If there is found among you within any of your gates, which the Lord your God gives you, a man or a woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Lord your God in transgressing his covenant, who has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, either the sun or moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded, as it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has been committed in Israel, then you shall bring to your gates that man or woman who has committed that wicked thing, and shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. Whoever is worthy of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, but he shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall put away the evil person from among you. And there you have, in that passage, very clear distinction. Now let's go to chapter 13 and see what it says of Deuteronomy. 13 of Deuteronomy and verse number 6. If your brother, the son of your mother, 13 and 6, the son of your daughter, the wife of your bosom, the friend who is as your own soul, secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. That's pretty wide, isn't it? You shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. Now listen to this, verse 12. If you hear someone in one of your cities, which the Lord your God gives you to dwell in, saying, certain corrupt men have gone out from among you and enticed the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, gods whom you have not known. Then you shall inquire, search out, and ask it diligently. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it. all that is in it, and all its livestock with the edge of the sword. And you shall gather all its plunder into the middle of the street, and completely burn with fire the city with all its plunder for the Lord your God, and it shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. So none of the accursed things shall remain in your hand, that the Lord may turn from the fierceness of his anger, and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and multiply you, just as he swore to your fathers, because you've listened to the voice of the Lord your God, to keep all his commandments, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of the Lord your God. Now, those are amazing passages, aren't they? Just keeping your fingers still in Acts chapter 12. You say, well, I could understand then why these people would react the way they reacted whenever Peter came out preaching that Jesus was God. Because to many Jewish people, to say that Jesus was God was idolatry. They said there's only one God. They were monotheists. One God. They were guilty, they would say, of blaspheming the name of God, and therefore they should rightly be executed by the civil power. Didn't the law of God say they were to be? If anybody entices you to say there is another God other than the one you are worshiping, you could imagine the immediate reaction of Jewish people whenever Peter says, now look, you Jew folk, you know, all your blessings are now going to come mightily upon the Gentiles. They say, no, how could we? Because they don't worship our God. So you got a problem. Now I've got to address that problem. What is the crux of the problem? What is the heart of the matter, as Joan Bakewell would put it? What is the heart of the matter? Well, the heart of the matter is that ancient Israel was a theocracy. A theocracy. Now, what's a theocracy? It is a government, a parliament, a leadership that is set up by God himself. Not only its high priests, but its kings. Its kings were the anointed of the Lord, and God was ultimately the leader of the nation. He lived in Israel, in the tabernacle, they went to him. So God was ultimately the leader. God in parliament, if you like. Every member of the state had to be a member of the state religion. Every male child born into Israel at 8 days old had to be circumcised. Every one of them. Any child that wasn't circumcised was cut off from the people. So it's a theocracy. Religion and politics were two sides of the one coin. The state was S-A-C-R-A-L, a sacral state. Under those terms, heresy was a crime against the state. And the state had a right and a duty to punish you if you worshipped other gods other than the God of Israel, within Israel. That's very clear. But the question we're facing now is, when the Christian gospel comes out across the New Testament days, was Israel still a sacral state in the first century, as it had been in the past? And the answer to that is no, it wasn't. Israel had long ceased to be a sacral state. Not only the 10 tribes, but Judah had lost its political power. The Assyrians destroyed the northern monarchy. The Babylonians destroyed the southern monarchy. The house of David was at an end. And when Israel was brought back from exile in Babylon, and the temple was rebuilt, and the city of Jerusalem rebuilt and restored, there was no monarchy restored. Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse number 15 categorically states that Israel's king must be a Jew. That's what Deuteronomy 17:15 says. You're not allowed to have anybody as your king who isn't a Jew. That's God's law. But of course, Israel had long since lost their true political head, their king of the house of David. And it wasn't by accident either. It was God who ended David's dynasty and had taken political power out of Israel's hands and given it to the Gentiles, particularly to the Romans at this time. Why? Because the nation had sinned against God and had rebelled against God. And Herod Agrippa, who was appointed by the Roman Emperor Claudius in verse number 1 of chapter 12, was certainly not recognized by God as the Lord's anointed. Even Herod the Great, point B in your notes there, was not qualified to be king of Israel. And when he executed John the Baptist, etc., he was not the Lord's anointed by any means. And this particular King Herod, who was his grandson, had some Jewish blood in him, but was not actually recognized by God as the rightful king of Israel. So it's very important, although that's very dry facts, it's very important to understand it when you're trying to understand this passage. You are no longer dealing with an Israel that has God in parliament, that has God as its leader, that has God's laws as the ultimate laws within the land. That has all been lost because of their sin, because of their rebellion, as God warned them. And even to this very day, you don't have a Jewish king in Jerusalem. And they'll say, only the Messiah, a Jewish leader told me the other day in England, only the Messiah will rebuild the temple again. Notice the irony there of verse 4 talking about the Passover. Notice the irony of that. You know what Passover stood for? You remember Moses walked up to Pharaoh and said, God says, let my people go. And in other words, worship according to their own conscience. And he wouldn't let them. But again and again, the Israelites pled with Pharaoh, please, please let us go and worship according to our own conscience, not under your jurisdiction. Let us out into the wilderness to worship according to our own conscience. And Passover was about that great exodus and that great freedom to worship according to your own conscience. And now what was happening? Israel was encouraging a half-Gentile political authority to deny Christians the right to worship God according to their own conscience. And not only denying them the right to worship God, they were denying them the very right to life itself at Passover time, of all times. Now, Jews, when they were exiled in these days, constantly asked for religious freedom to worship according to their own conscience. And they were given it when they were in exile. But they didn't give it to these early Christians. And I can see almost in your face and feel almost in your heart that you're saying, Derek, are you hinting at anti-Semitism? And are you standing in the Crescent Church pulpit to really down the Jews and say they're all like this? Well, now, just let's balance it out. I'm only expounding what happened with these ancient Jews and the early Christians. There's no doubt that this is what they did. But I've got to stand in front of you tonight, and I have to sadly also say that Christendom, when it got to power, and whenever the great emperor Constantine became a Christian and the Roman Empire embraced Christianity as the state religion, what happened? the Christians used the political power of the Romans to discriminate against the Jews. And they even took to persecuting Jews through the state who they thought should be executed, and even took to persecuting heretics within the Christian church through the state. They used the Roman authorities to persecute heretics within the Christian church, never to speak of the Jews. This is a very serious thing. These Jews at the head of Acts 12 used the state to persecute Christians. Then Christians, in their turn, used the state to persecute Jews. And it's very interesting when you study it. And please don't misunderstand me here. Please don't misunderstand me. Listen carefully to what I'm saying. Not that you're not listening, but double up. Listen carefully. The same methods that the Jews used to maintain their sacred state, Christendom used the very same thing. Judaism insisted that every male citizen be circumcised as a baby. And what did Christendom do? This is a fact of history. Christendom began to hold that baptism was equivalent to circumcision. And in different centuries and in different countries, the baptism of every infant in the country was enforced by civil law under pain of death or political disability. I have to actually say to you that Martin Luther, if you had not baptized your child, would and often did call in the princes of the German states to have you put in prison and punished if you did not have your child baptized. That is a fact. Now, do all people who believe in child baptism believe that it should be enforced by the civil law? Of course they don't. Millions of them today do not and would abhor such a thing. But what I am saying tonight is that in history, that is exactly in the past, sadly, what happened. And that's a very difficult problem to deal with. And then, of course, you see the crusades rising of people going from England and so forth and crusading and trying to get the holy sites from Muslims and so on, and the wars fought in Jesus' name, which was just rubbish and had nothing to do with the gospel or the Bible. And many people were slain because of that. What I want to say tonight publicly is to wed the church with the state and to use political discrimination to bolster the church's privileged position and to keep the state pure is the very opposite of Christian holiness. It is not authorized in the Bible to use the state to enforce Christianity. And what about our land? Well, what about it? Dare I stand in the Crescent Church pulpit tonight and even criticize the phrase, a Protestant parliament for a Protestant people, without some hothead either listening to this tape or sitting in this meeting wanting to shoot me, and may even do so? Is secularism not at the very heart of a lot of Northern Ireland's problems? Sadly, it is. If a person is not a Protestant, I know of businesses like this myself. If the person is not a Protestant, they dare not employ them. And outwardly they wouldn't say it, but inwardly, and I've heard them say it, we can't, because our premises will be blown up and we'll be killed. I've even had to deal with problems like this and counsel people who face this kind of problem, where their employees say, you will not employ a Catholic If you employ a Catholic, we'll burn you down and we'll shoot you, or whatever. And vice versa. Catholic people saying, we will not employ a Protestant because of what he is. I spoke to a man this very afternoon who told me many years ago he had beside him a very brilliant man. And he tried for promotion and he just couldn't get it. The most brilliant man in the place, because in those days it was because he was a Catholic. Now, I'm very glad to say that the Fair Employment Agency has worked very hard. It was very good to hear Shorts today come out, even under the threat of bombing, and say that they are doing their very best to have fair employment within Shorts and to do their very best to have equal opportunity according to ability and not according to religious background. And I thought it very brave. But of course, this is a problem of sacralism, isn't it? We must never get to the position where we say, if that person does not agree even with evangelical teaching, then we won't employ them. Or if that person doesn't agree with evangelical teaching, then they cannot lead the nation. Or they cannot hold a public position of power or responsibility. That would be taking Northern Ireland or the UK or a nation into the very same position as was happening here with Herod. Sacralism. Using the state's power to discriminate against an individual because of their religious belief. I mean, you take the very situation where we have in the United Kingdom the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is chosen ultimately by the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister is the one who has the say ultimately, with two names given to him, to choose one to recommend to the Queen in order to become the leader of a church. That, of course, is a vestige of sacralism. Is it not the Constitution, in the Constitution of the Irish Republic, that gives a special place to the Roman Catholic Church? The same thing. Writing into a constitution of a country, sacralism. And there are many people, and many Catholic people in the Irish Republic actually, who would dearly love to have it removed because they don't agree with it. These are very important questions, and I'm only trying to say, are they not problems that arise because of the difficulty of wedding church and state? And of course, as someone said to me coming into the meeting tonight, the very problem of blasphemy laws is a very real problem. There are blasphemy laws under the British government against the name of Jesus and the name of God. And now, of course, Muslims are coming up and saying, well, if you speak out against Allah, then, of course, should we not have blasphemy laws for our religion? These are all problems that stem from the difficulty of sacralism. Now, these are big questions. Can I answer them all? I'm not a politician. I'm not here to preach politics. But I do live in a realm where politics are very important and where we are not told to ignore them. So what as Christians are we to do faced with all of these vestiges and difficulties that arise because of the problem of sacralism? Now consider Peter's position. He has the full weight of the Jewish establishment against him. That's clear. They want him dead. And now he has the full weight of the state against him, because Herod was brought up as a friend. Actually, he was raised as a boy in Rome and was a friend of the royal imperial family. And because as a child and as a teenager and as a young man of his friendship there, he was sent back to Judea. And he had this land, and more land was given to him because he was very closely involved with the imperial family. And he now has the full weight of the authority of Rome behind him to try to rule this state. And he's ruling the state, and he's playing politics, of course, because he wants to please all the Jews that are in this state, obviously, and try and ride the fence with the Romans and with the Jews at the same time. Now, you consider Peter's position. He's got the state against him. He's got the Jewish establishment against him, and I'm sure the poor fellow, when he was in prison, is bound to have said in his heart, is it worth it? Are all these great people wrong? And I mean, to be fair to Martin Luther, whenever he stood for the wonderful truth of the freedom, of the truth of justification by faith, and that you can only be saved by putting faith in Christ alone, and not through the works of the church, when he stood against that, he not only found the full weight of the Roman Catholic Church against him, he found the Emperor of Spain against him as well. And very bravely, he stood up for the truth of justification by faith, and brought it to us, for which we're very grateful in our day, in his day. But would that we had another like him who would rise again powerfully and bring it to the nation again, because we desperately need this truth of justification by faith preached again. That you cannot be saved by baptism. You cannot be saved by good works. You cannot be saved by joining a church. You cannot be saved by doing the best that you can. There's only one means of salvation. There is only one name under heaven given amongst men whereby we must be saved. You must personally repent of your sin and put your faith in the lovely Lord Jesus alone for salvation. And he died for you, and he shed his blood for you at Calvary, rose again for your justification. And if you repent and receive him as your Savior, then you'll have salvation. And it's got nothing to do with the church, or pastor, or pope, or priest, or person, or potentate, or any person or people. It's only in Christ, and in Christ alone is salvation. And I want to ask this great congregation this evening, and those who are watching, where is your faith placed? Where are you trusting for salvation? Where is your faith resting? If you were to die tonight and go out into eternity, what are you resting on for salvation? Christ alone or not? If not, you'll perish. If you are, you'll be saved. That's the truth of Scripture, and that gospel is available to everybody. But here is Peter, knowing this truth, coming out with it, and he's got the state against him, and he's got the Jewish establishment against him. He doesn't actually describe how he feels about this question, but I can imagine it. But I'll tell you what he does describe. He describes powerfully how that he was released. He couldn't believe that when he got into prison, suddenly an angel comes to him. Notice the detail in verse 8. Gird yourself, tie on your sandals, put on your garment, and follow me. All those details. And I counted it 4 times in the chapter. 4 times in the chapter, we are told categorically that it was an angel of the Lord that did it. Notice the emphasis here. And notice in verse number 9 it says that Peter at first didn't believe it was happening to him. He thought it was a vision. He thought it was a dream. He didn't think it was real. Now, why does the Bible not describe his feelings in prison and his dilemma and all the political problems? Why does the Bible emphasize what's going on here? Not by what is the feeling in Peter's heart over the night. What is the issue at stake? Well, the issue at stake is not that he got out of prison, but who got him out of prison. That's the emphasis in the chapter. Who got him out of prison? It was, in fact, a miracle. The Lord had done it. God intervened and sent an angel. And I can see some of you watching this video or listening to this tape, some of you who may not be believers, and a wee smile comes on your face maybe, and you say, well, here we go again. Here we go again, these Christians with their angels and God's intervention. You know, the political problem of Christians and Jews is very interesting and fascinating and all that. Yes, that's very interesting, but why do they have to go talking about angels? Well, my friend, I want to tell you that when the Jewish Sanhedrin decided that Jesus Christ of Nazareth was not the King of the Jews and was not the Son of God and decided to execute him, God intervened and said, you're wrong, and sent angels. He even sent an angel on Christ's way to Calvary in the Garden of Gethsemane to strengthen him. There were angels right there at the tomb of Christ. Angels intervened and were seen by people. When they had an unholy arrangement with Pilate and Herod to execute Christ, God intervened and raised Christ from the dead and sent angels all around the place. Now here is a case of the state intervening again with God's purposes. And Herod Agrippa politically discriminating and persecuting the Christians and wanting to repudiate and disown the Christians. What happens? God sends an angel into the prison to order Peter out of the prison, and walks with him, and the iron doors, gates swing back, and Peter's out in the cool night air through an angel. 4 times we're told. You see, notice that God set Peter free in order to set the gospel free. The state had put its hand on the gospel and said, no, you will not mix Jews and Gentiles. You will not have it. And God said, I will, and sent an angel. When the state said, we will execute Christ, he is not worthy of living, or whatever, as the Jews say, according to their law, although Pilate tried to wash his hands of it, God intervened and said, no, you are wrong, and raised Jesus from the dead. The Jewish state, as a state, no longer had control over matters of faith. That's what God's saying. And it certainly had no power to enforce a monopoly of the state religion over God's revealed truth in the gospel. The gospel was now free to be taken to the Gentiles, and the Gentiles could receive the blessings without becoming Jews. And God sent an angel to reinforce the truth. The gospel was for the whole world. Outside the control of the government of Judea, outside the control of the government of Northern Ireland, outside the control of the government of Ceausescu, outside the government's control of Gorbachev, outside the government's control of George Bush, you name it, in any place on the face of the earth, from one end to the other, God sends an angel to intervene in this situation to say, leave my gospel alone. It is for everybody, everywhere. And he sent an angel to do it. And I can tell you, when God set the gospel free from the control of the state of Judea, you can be certain that God never intentioned to put it under the control of any Gentile state anywhere. My, what lessons Peter was learning. He who had denied his Lord, he who was so adamant to the teenage girl that he didn't even know the Lord, was now an instrument in the Lord's hand for preserving the gospel. Isn't that hope for you if you're a backslider tonight and away from the Lord and cold in heart and dry in your spiritual life? Isn't there hope for you there, my friend? Here is the man whom God sends an angel to bring out of prison, because he is the man upon whom the very baton of the gospel is, into whose hand the very baton of the gospel is placed. And there's hope here for every backslider in the world, isn't there? Look at it. Look at the hope in it. You wouldn't have ever thought that this man could ever have become as important in the plan of God who had once denied the Lord. Is there somebody here tonight and you once denied the Lord and you got away from him and you're sitting here with a cold heart and you say, oh, Derek, if you only knew the things I've done, and I'm a believer and I'm far away. Hey, friends, hold it. Notice the truth in this passage. It's for you. Look at the man we're dealing with. Once a backslider, once a man who cursed and swore using foul fisherman's oaths that he did not even know Christ at all. And look at him now. What had he learned? Well, he had learned that when God intervened in his life and sent him to the house of Cornelius, that the gospel was free from all the dietary laws of the Jews. You can eat bacon now if you want. In fact, there's a fellow here tonight at Spring Harvest. He bought a t-shirt and I saw him walking amongst the thousands. I said, hello, Jim, how are you? And right on his chest was a big blazing sign that said, Jesus saved my bacon. Well, he's not wearing it tonight. But that's true. It's true, isn't it? You can eat that bacon if you want. You can eat prawns if you want. And so on and so forth. Those dietary laws are now Christians and Jews believing in Christ, are free from all of those dietary laws and all of that isolationism that there was in the Old Testament under God's law. And secondly, Peter was learning that God's intervention to deliver him from prison was setting the gospel free from the sacralist state control. Both interventions are vital. Don't you see that? If God hadn't intervened and shown him those two things in a very powerful way, the gospel could never have come to the nations of the world. And I couldn't stand here and preach it tonight. I'd have to say, well, you'll have to go through Jewish laws, my friend, if you come from a Jewish background, and you'll have to obey all their dietary laws and so on, and then believe in Christ. Or I would have to say to you, well, now, you've got to obey the state, and whatever the state says now, and what the government says about the gospel, that is the thing that you must follow. No! The gospel is free of both of those things, and it's got to be free of them, or it's no good to anybody in these days. Don't you think that many countries are still afraid of the gospel because they perceive it only to be an arm of Western democracy? Or imperialism. And we can think of examples when missionaries have gone in and then tradesmen and business comes in after that, and sometimes the gospel and materialism seem to be the same thing. If God sends you to another nation, my friend, you'll have to have a whole lot of baggage unpacked, won't you, of your culture and your language and your background, if you're really going to get the gospel across to people, that it's not an Irish gospel, that it's not an Ulster gospel, that it's not a Western gospel. It's God's gospel. It's not ours. It doesn't come from our culture. My goodness, to hear some people, you think Christ was born in Lurgan and brought up in Portadown and died in Belfast. No. And I'm not saying that lightly. I find when I went to the Far East and I got into Korea in particular, I found young men streets and miles and years ahead of me in spiritual prowess and power, and they'd never heard of the Faith Mission Bookshop. And they'd never heard of Tuesday night at the Crescent. And they'd never heard, many of them, of even Northern Ireland as such. Never heard of our Bible colleges, never heard of Amy Carmichael and the great preachers and teachers and missionaries we've had in the past. How glad we are of that and how we appreciate it. But our culture isn't where the gospel was born. If the gospel, says David Gooding, is going to win, then it must be free and be seen to be free from all the political and state control. Your gospel must be seen to be free of politics. Free of it. Totally and absolutely free of it. Not trammeled by it, not pushing and shoving it, not trying to bring it into it. The gospel must be free of all political parties and free of all state control. The gospel isn't the product or the servant of any political theory. Communism, democracy, or whatever. It is not the arm of a political movement. It is not the arm of any government. The gospel is above it and beyond it and wider than it. And that's so important. That's why God sent an angel to set Peter free. You know, the reaction of when Peter went to the house where the Christians were, and he goes into the house where the Christians have been praying the night through for him. And Rhoda comes to the door. And Peter's release comes. Well, it's interesting. It certainly shows that these Christians didn't expect miracles at every hour of the day. Don't think that all the New Testament Christians expected miracles all the time. This lot didn't. In fact, they didn't even believe that it had happened. What about the credibility of the whole story of the miracle of Peter's release? I think it's important. As David says, when you're dealing with a miracle, you've got to remember and check out the person who's telling you about the miracle, the witness of the miracle, and the reliability of the person who's giving you the history of the miracle. That's very important. Who's telling it and what historian recorded it. But more than that, it not only depends on who told you it, or the historian who told you it, or the person who says they saw the miracle, it depends on a sense of proportion. If God intervened by sending an angel to help Peter find a button that had dropped off his shirt, the means used would appear to be out of proportion with the importance of the situation. If you couldn't find your socks in the morning, brother, sorry to be so down to earth, down to your feet, and an angel appeared and said, they're behind there, look, where you put them. You should wash them as well. You would say, I don't believe that an angel appeared to him to show him where that sock was or where that button was. I don't believe that. Well, I would kind of agree with you too. Wouldn't you? The means used would be way out of proportion with the importance of the situation, that kind of story would be difficult to believe. Do you believe in the credibility of Luke as a historian? There are a whole lot of people who say, it was one of Peter's friends, who let him out. It's just Christians telling you stories. But in verse 7, verse 8, verse 9, and verse 10, it tells you it was an angel. Why does the historian keep telling you it was an angel? Well, because he's saying it was a direct, miraculous intervention of God. And only a direct, miraculous intervention of God could settle this issue. If God makes food laws and expects you to keep them on pain of death, then there's only one person can cancel the food laws, and that's God. If some of the local Christians came along and said, well, now, we think you shouldn't really have these Jewish laws anymore, and we think Christians shouldn't really, sort of have to stay by them. Well, they could argue all day, but nobody would ever come to a conclusion. But when God intervenes and shows it to Peter in this great vision of the sheet coming down out of heaven, etc., as we studied it, then, of course, you understand that they have been repealed. If it were just Peter's opinion or the apostles' opinion, that would have been inadequate. This is a matter of fundamental importance to the independence of the gospel and the evangelization of the world. Can the state intervene and tell you what's what? Can the state intervene in church life and say, well, he's a heretic and we'll kill him, and she's a heretic and we'll deal with her, and he's this and he's that and he's the other, we'll deal with them? It's worth noting, is it not? Of course, the people who were praying fervently for Peter's deliverance should regard as mad the person who informed them that their prayers had been answered. Imagine getting down, Lord, let Peter out of prison. Please let him out of prison. Well, he's out here. You're mad. Lord, please, Lord, please. He's outside. You're mad. You're out of your mind. Isn't that like Christians? I remember one night a fellow came to see me. He wanted to get saved. He'd been there for a couple of hours after the meeting talking to others. They said, please talk to him, Derek. I went into a little corner and I sat down and I said, well, now, Norman, what's wrong? Well, he said, the IRA tried to have burned me out, he says, and I've been in pubs drinking, trying to get rid of my sorrows, and I'm frightened and I want to get saved. And I talked to him and I said, well, pray. And I got down on my knees and I said, Lord, I said, here's Norman and the IRA have done this and that and the other to him, Lord, and you know all about him. And Lord, you said, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And suddenly Norman jumped up. I'm saved, he said. And I looked up and I think I remember I said, basically, are you sure? And it's not a pantomime, it's true, After I said, well, now, Norman, very good, but are you really sure now? Have you got the root of the matter in you, son? Is it really, have you really? Well, he said, Derek, you said in prayer that Jesus said if I came to him, he would give me rest. And I've just come to him and he's just given me rest. And he has gone on so well for God through all of these years, and I see him from time to time still going on for God, and what joy he brings to my heart. But, there you are, you're telling people how to get saved, and then when they get saved, you doubt them. That's not the way it should be, is it? Rhoda's simple joy shines brightly against the dark background of the church's incredulity. They said, but it's his guardian angel. But no, it was the real Peter. Impossibilities, everybody, are God's specialities. Because we are finite and limited, it's difficult for us to imagine how powerful our God is and omnipotent our Lord is. God still moves amongst His people today. To put it in plain language, does your God do anything? Does He? Is He just hymns and services and going to meetings and etc.? You know, is that all it is? Or do you know Him? Do you know the real living God who can do impossible things and change impossible situations around? Let's remember that we're all faced sometimes with a series of great opportunities that are brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. They're actually opportunities to prove God, and we think they're impossible situations. The reaction amongst the unbelievers was no different to what it would be today. As in Peter's day, they had no way of explaining how Peter got out. So they tried to ignore the reality of what happened. They searched for Peter and they couldn't find him. Herod gave no credence to miracles. He didn't believe that God intervenes. And he blamed his guards and he executed them. Sad, isn't it? In those days, if your prisoner escaped, you were dead. You were responsible for him, so we executed them. And isn't it rather interesting to note the little detail in the middle of all this? Verse 19, he searched for him, couldn't find him. He examined the guards, commanded that they should be put to death, and then he went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. What is that? That's escapism. That's a telltale human reaction, isn't it? When you want to avoid the unpleasant aspects of reality, God intervenes in human lives. God intervenes in the lives of churches. God intervenes in the lives of individuals. God intervenes in the lives of nations. God will intervene in your life if a whole lot of you would let Him. God would intervene in my life a whole lot more if I'd only ask Him and give Him His way. Oh, what a sad thing this is. This man doesn't face up to the greatness of God intervening, so he goes away, probably for a holiday or something. He goes down to Caesarea and stays there. He's bugged by it, isn't he? He's annoyed by it. It's disturbing him. Well, how did he get out? What's going on? But he won't face up to the fact that it's God who's got him out. But then you see, of course, if you encourage the civil power to arbitrate in matters of faith, don't be surprised if the civil power eventually begins to behave as if it were God. You wanted to intervene in the affairs of your church and in the affairs of what you believe and try and uphold what you believe and protect what you believe, and in discriminating against others who don't believe it, then don't be surprised if you use it that way if they start to behave as if they were God. You remember way back, whenever Peter came to the Jewish Christians at Jerusalem and told them that the Gentiles had received the Holy Spirit, they glorified God. Well, you hear the echo of this. This fellow, this Herod, the people of Tyre and Sidon wanted to keep in with him. They'd had a quarrel with him. It doesn't tell us what it was, but they made Blastus their friend. I think they bribed him, the king's chamberlain, and they wanted peace because they needed their country supplied with food by the king's country. They needed Rome's financial and economical support. So he goes down, and on a certain day, Herod sits in this royal apparel on the throne, and he gives a great oration. And they're all sitting there. Josephus says it was at dawn, and he was wearing, in his history of this, he was wearing a long silver garment that really powerful, shining in the sun, and everybody looked at it and thought how wonderful, and they began to say from all over that area, all over that huge crowd, "You're a god, you're not a man. You're a god, you're not a man." And what happens? Well, I think if you look at this very carefully, the Christians accepted that the Gentiles had got the Holy Spirit, and the Bible says they glorified God. This fellow wouldn't accept that the Gentiles now had all the blessings of the Jews because he was trying to get rid of Peter, who was doing that kind of work. And the people say you are a god, and he drinks it in like wine, and he doesn't stand out and say, no, it's not true, I am not a god. He encourages it. And what is that the shadow of? Well, that's the shadow of the Antichrist. Because one of these days, in this world, the Antichrist will come. And do you know what he'll do? Well, of course, what he'll do is, I don't know whether some of you maybe have read it. Let's read it, 2 Thessalonians 2. And I'm nearly through. 2 Thessalonians 2. This is the Antichrist that's coming on the world. Now, brethren, concerning verse 1, 2 Thessalonians 2, of our Lord Jesus and our gathering together to him, we ask you not soon to be shaken in mind or troubled by spirit, word, or letter, as if by us, from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. In other words, there is coming a time when the Antichrist will rise in the world. He'll sit in Jerusalem in the temple of God, and he will say, I am God. And the nations of the world will worship him. Those who don't, and don't take a 666 upon their person, will be in dire trouble. It'll be the greatest tribulation the world has ever seen, and the greatest slavery the world has ever seen. But notice that this is exactly in Acts 12, the shadow of it. David makes a point in his book on Acts that the midpoint of Luke's gospel is Christ's transfiguration. God says, this is my son, and he's glorified, whiter than any laundry man could whiten a garment, glistening. This is my son, and he's transfigured. God glorifies him. That's the midpoint of Luke's gospel. We are tonight at exactly the midpoint of the Acts of the Apostles. The dead center of the Acts of the Apostles. And just at the dead center of Luke's gospel, Christ is glorified and glistens. And God glorifies him. Herod sits glistening in his silver-threaded garment, and the people say, you are God. And he doesn't glorify God. And God doesn't underline any glorification or deification of him. And what happens? Well, God strikes him down. And he has problems with his intestines. And according to Josephus, 5 days later, probably an obstruction of the bowel, etc., eaten of worms, he dies. He is aping God, and he wasn't God. Look at the phenomenal power that men have today and the governments of the world. Trying to find a way to stop the Muslims or to stop the Christian forces, for example, in Beirut, nominal Christian forces, blasting and shooting and killing and all of that. And world leaders, poor wee John Major, well, I shouldn't say wee, but he seems so tiny, doesn't he? And so vulnerable, and I pray for him, and I like him, and admire him. And you see him there, and he's doing his best, doing his very best to try and help, and he's saying to Brian Walden, isn't he? He's saying, well, Brian, I might fail. That's a change for a British Prime Minister to say I might fail. So refreshing. I might fail, he says, but I want to try and help these people. You put yourself in that man's shoes or any government leader's shoes. You put yourself in Gorbachev's shoes tonight. What would you do? Trying to stop the Soviet Union tearing itself apart. Can you not see it, everybody? Somebody one of these days is going to be tempted to do what the Roman emperors did to hold the Roman Empire together. When it started to fall apart, they said, we are God. And the people worshipped them as God. And they held them together. And the scripture says that one of these days out of our world will come a man who says, I am God. And he'll hold all the religions of the world together, and he'll hold all the politics of the world together, and he'll be the Antichrist. And it will be the biggest slavery the world has ever known. And it's coming, but Christ will defeat him. But isn't it amazing how that falls in Acts just at that very moment, at the very center of this thing, very center of this marvelous book? And just to encourage your hearts as you go. What happened to the Christians after the angel of the Lord, verse 23, struck him? Because he didn't give glory to God? Notice the last two verses. The word of God grew and multiplied. In spite of all the threats, growth. They weren't front page news like Herod. No, but they plugged away, doing the work of the Lord entrusted to them. In spite of threats, growth. Tested in verse 25, but fulfilled. I love that word. Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry. Are you going through it, Christian, tonight? Are you under pressure? As you look out over the world scene too, Christian, and wonder what the future holds, are you under pressure? Well, can I just say to you, you'll find fulfillment in doing what the Lord has asked you to do. That's your job and mine. And regardless of circumstances, look at their vision. They took a young fella called Mark, and away they went with him to serve the Lord. A big vision, despite all the threats, all the testings, and all the persecution. I hope that the Lord has written this on our hearts. The gospel is free of politics. Let's keep it free and reach out in our land in these days.